Hello friends, Barbara here. Is your period out of whack? It's early, it's late, it's heavy, it's missing in action entirely. Well, let's talk. Most of you are pretty tuned in to your menstrual cycle and what's normal for you. And so when your cycle starts to act weird, a lot of you get worried. Well, most of you can just relax. In your 30s and 40s, your cycle can change for a number of reasons that are very benign and often quite easily re-regulated. So let's look at 6 scenarios. Number 1, my cycle has become very erratic. Well, your period might be coming sooner than usual, later than usual, or you might start skipping cycles. This usually signals the beginning of perimenopause. That's the up to 10-year stretch before you officially reach menopause. And it can begin during your 30s and 40s. You're generally still fertile, but your ovaries have begun to sputter. Your pituitary gland is sending out the signal to ovulate, but the ovaries are missing the signal and they're not getting an egg ready. So no ovulation, no progesterone production. And that causes erratic cycles. Now, they can also be related to a thyroid dysfunction, and that's also easily fixed. So don't fret. Progesterone can help you regulate your cycles, and it's also a great thyroid support. I have a thyroid blog if you want to read more about your thyroid, and I have a handout for the use of progesterone with irregular cycles. So you can write for that or email. Number 2. Barbara, I'm starting to get really bad cramps. Well, 60% of you have menstrual cramps, but you can fix it. You need to be like the other 40% of the women who have pain-free periods. Now, cramps are usually due to estrogen dominance, and progesterone can really help balance that. It can also be due to endometriosis, and this occurs in about 10% of women. And endometriosis is when your uterine tissue is growing outside the uterus in other parts of the pelvic cavity. So now, when you're shedding your uterine lining in your monthly cycle, this wayward tissue tries to shed, but it's trapped. And that's what can cause that severe pain. Endometriosis does not usually occur out of the blue. It'll start as early as your 20s and gradually builds up until the pain can become quite crippling. You diagnose it through a pelvic exam and an ultrasound, and it can be alleviated with the use of natural progesterone because progesterone lowers these estrogen levels and shrinks uterine tissue. Now, some doctors will prescribe a synthetic hormone to treat endometriosis, but you could start with good old natural progesterone from God's pharmacy. One more cramp culprit, uterine fibroids. Now, uterine fibroids are benign growths that occur outside the uterine wall or inside. And about 30% of women will have a fibroid at some point in their life. So don't fret. Don't think this is something that's so unusual and you need to be scared. They can range from very, very small to the size of a grapefruit or even larger. And they're found with ultrasound. Now, usually if you have a fibroid, you're going to have pain all month, not just cramping around the menstrual cycle. They're benign. They usually don't need any surgery because they can be shrunk with progesterone. So if you want to email me for my handouts on cramping, endometriosis, and fibroids, and how progesterone is used for these conditions, I can send that to you. You could also, if you're having a lot of cramps, ladies, rub progesterone on your abdomen during the time of the cramping and repeat as needed. Another good thing, 100 milligrams of vitamin B6. Magnesium will relax that smooth muscle tissue, and Vitex, known as chasteberry, helps also. Number 3, I'm having a brown vaginal discharge. Well, this causes a lot of you some concern, but you don't need to worry. It's associated with old blood. If your period is late, you might get brown rather than red tissue because the blood is older. It can also mean that during your last menses, the entire lining failed to make its timely exit and got caught in some uterine folds, and now it's coming out and it's brown. So that's not a cause for great concern, so just relax. Number 4, I have extremely heavy bleeding. Ladies, this is so common. 1 out of 5 of you has had heavy periods for 2 months or more. And it can be due to that estrogen dominance, uterine fibroids, endometriosis, polyps. They're little clumps of endometrial tissue that form in the uterus or on the cervix, and they can go away by themselves. Hormone imbalance, which I said, high estrogen, and IUD will a lot of times cause heavy bleeding. Of course, a miscarriage, but the culprit for many of you is perimenopause, because your ovulation is erratic, your progesterone goes low, the lining is thicker than usual, and your flow is heavier. If you have continuous flooding for 3-4 months, doctors sometimes want to do an endometrial biopsy to give you the all clear that something not more serious. But at home, what can you do? Progesterone to balance that estrogen. You're going to up your dose a half teaspoon 2 times a day from day 10 to 26 for 2 or 3 months. Vitamin B6, about 100 milligrams a day. Magnesium, about 400 milligrams a day. So there you go with the heavy bleeding. You can address it. Now, number 5, I've started spotting between my periods. Oh, this is really common, and it's almost always harmless. It's also known as breakthrough bleeding. Now, some low-dose birth control pills can cause this spotting, but the most common cause is our friend perimenopause, where you have your hormone shifts. Your body's not getting the distinct signal to shed in its regular cyclical pattern, so it begins doing so randomly. And your progesterone can be low compared to your estrogen, so the lining can be thicker than usual, which can cause this intra-period spotting. And progesterone can balance this for you. And by the way, I do want to say, when you hit menopause, you're not going to have that cycle, and you might even miss it. So use your progesterone and regulate it. Last one, I'm skipping periods. Don't fret. This is where it all begins when you're coming up into the menopausal stage. Now, if you miss 3 in a row and you're not pregnant, it's hormonal. And recall that perimenopause can start in your 30s. 45 used to be the age, but now our lifestyle and stress and our food is pushing perimenopause up earlier and earlier. So you're not having a period because you haven't ovulated, and the progesterone release is what causes the signal for the lining to drop. And stress is also a factor because high cortisol will block ovarian function, and progesterone can lower cortisol. And sometimes if you've been on an extreme diet, you can skip periods because your body's under stress. And that's another reason, but I don't want any of you extremely dieting. If you want to diet, you're going to call me and I'm going to tell you food is a tool for weight loss, not the enemy. So there you have it. Menstrual Cycle 101. This was actually the short version. I have the longer version on my blog, hopeforyourhormones.com. So, you have questions I didn't answer, write to me or call me 877-880-0170.